This is my take from podcast. If you want to listen summary of podcast, start with a free trial for detailed summaries on Apple Podcasts and Spotify using link in descriptions. Here is key point discussed in podcast number 1. Sugar expert. This diet kills your sugar cravings completely. So, let's dive into the world of sugar and its impact on our brains. Dr. Robert Lustig, a world-leading sugar expert, shares some fascinating insights. He explains that when we consume ultra-processed foods, we're not just getting a dopamine hit, we're also creating a biochemical and medical problem. This is because our brains are wired to respond to these foods as a threat, triggering our fear center, the amygdala. The more we try to exert control over our food choices, the more stress and pain we experience. This can lead to depression, anxiety, and even addiction. Dr. Lustig also talks about the concept of the hostage brain, where our brains are held captive by our desires and cravings. He explains that dopamine plays a crucial role in this process, as it's both a learning neurotransmitter and a reward stimulator. However, when we overstimulate our dopamine receptors, we can develop tolerance and eventually addiction. So, what can we do to break free from this cycle? Dr. Lustig suggests that we need to get our dopamine receptors back up, which can be achieved through remedies like dopamine fasting or abstinence. He also emphasizes the importance of removing the offensive stimulus, such as sugar, from our diets. Now, let's talk about sugar substitutes. Dr. Lustig reveals that non-nutritive sweeteners, like aspartame and sucralose, can actually contribute to dementia by generating reactive oxygen species. He also shares his new theory on the causes of Alzheimer's, which involves an energy crisis in the brain caused by a combination of factors, including environmental toxins, sleep deprivation, and ultra-processed food. Dr. Lustig uses an analogy to explain this complex process, comparing it to a petrol station and a car. He explains that our brains run on energy, just like a car runs on petrol, and that we need to keep our energy production efficient to avoid an energy crisis. Finally, Dr. Lustig talks about the importance of ketones in improving cognitive performance. He explains that carbohydrates can actually inhibit energy production in our brains, whereas ketones can provide a more efficient source of energy. He also emphasizes the need to avoid ultra-processed foods, which are loaded with poisons that can harm our brains and bodies. You know, it's interesting, we've been talking about ultra-processed food and how it's not going away, but what's fascinating is that we can actually make it healthier. And the cool thing is, it didn't affect their sales or profits. So, it's possible to make ultra-processed food healthier without sacrificing taste or profitability. However, what's interesting is that when we re-engineered those products, we didn't tell the public about it, and they didn't even notice. They just kept buying and consuming them as usual. So, it's not necessarily about the addictive nature of the food itself, but rather about the ingredients and the way they're processed. And speaking of ingredients, let's talk about sugar. The United States put fluoride in the water to prevent dental caries, which are caused by sugar consumption. But here's the thing. If we didn't have sugar in our food, we wouldn't need fluoride in our water. It's a vicious cycle. And while there may be some risks associated with them, the benefits far outweigh the risks. And it's not just about individual health, it's about herd immunity. When we vaccinate, we're not just protecting ourselves, we're protecting those around us who may be more vulnerable. But here's the thing, we need to be careful about the information we consume. And that's not healthy. We need to seek out credible sources of information, like peer-reviewed studies and expert opinions. And we need to be open-minded, willing to consider different perspectives and change our minds when presented with new evidence. So, what can we do to change our lives? Well, first and foremost, we need to know who we are. What are our values, our priorities? What's important to us? And then we need to take care of ourselves, physically and mentally. We need to eat well, exercise regularly, and manage our stress levels. And we need to be mindful of our relationships, our connections with others. And finally, let's talk about loneliness. But here's the thing, loneliness is not the same as solitude. Solitude is being alone, but being comfortable with it. Loneliness is a lack of human connection, and it's a major risk factor for chronic disease. So, what can we do to combat loneliness? Well, we need to reach out to others, build connections, and cultivate meaningful relationships. And we need to take care of ourselves, physically and mentally, so that we can be present and engaged with others. So, there you have it, folks. That's my take on ultra-processed food, vaccines, and loneliness. And remember, it's all about community health, not just individual health. Thanks for tuning in. Being alone is a choice, it's something we can control. But being lonely is a feeling that can creep up on us, even when we're surrounded by people. And what's really interesting is that this feeling of loneliness is often linked to serotonin levels in our brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that helps regulate our mood, and when we're deficient in it, we can feel irritable and disconnected from others. Now, one of the main reasons we're deficient in serotonin is because of our diet. We're not eating enough of the right foods, like eggs, chicken, and fish, that contain the amino acid tryptophan, which is necessary for serotonin production. Instead, we're eating ultra-processed foods that are devoid of nutrients and causing inflammation in our bodies. This inflammation is not only affecting our serotonin levels, but also our gut health, which is where 90% of our serotonin is produced. So, it's no wonder that we're feeling lonely and disconnected when our gut is out of balance. In fact, the research shows that they're only effective for seizures, and even then, it's only a 30 to 50% reduction. And when it comes to depression and anxiety, the evidence is modest at best. So, what's the solution? Well, it's not a quick fix, but it's a simple one: eat real food. Focus on whole, unprocessed foods that are rich in nutrients and fiber. And don't be fooled by those fancy labels that claim to be healthy. If it's got a label, it's probably not good for you. Just stick to the basics: fruits, vegetables, meats, and whole grains. And don't forget to shop around the outside of the supermarket where the real food is. By making these simple changes to your diet, you can start to feel more connected, more energized, and more in control of your life. And that's what it's all about, right? Taking control of our health and our well-being. So, let's make a commitment to ourselves to start making some changes, starting today. We can do this, guys. We just need to take it one step at a time. So, if you're pre-diabetic, the first thing you should do is get rid of all ultra-processed food from your diet. That's right, just cut it out. And in doing so, you'll also be eliminating all the sugar from your diet. If that doesn't work, then add some exercise to the mix. Just simple things like walking your dog can make a big difference. They can be a really useful tool in helping you understand how your body is responding to different foods. And the good news is, you can get a glucose monitor for pretty cheap these days. Just $20 or $30 on Amazon. But here's the thing. Some scientists are against using glucose monitors for non-diabetics. They say it's not necessary, that it's not going to make a difference. And it's not just about the immediate effects, it's about the downstream outcomes that can happen months later. And it's not just white rice, it's things like tomato ketchup too. So, using a glucose monitor can be a real eye-opener. It can help you make some trades and changes to your diet that can have a big impact on your health. And it's not just about the food, it's about understanding your relationship with it. They're not just about getting high, they're about rewiring your brain and helping you think differently. They can be a powerful tool for mental health, and I'm a big fan of the research that's being done in this area. Your brain is like a mountain with snow on it. And every time you do something, you create a path in the snow. But over time, those paths can become ruts, and it's hard to think your way out of them. Psychedelics are like a big blizzard that comes in and fills in those ruts, giving you a fresh start. And that's what we need, a fresh start. We need to be able to rethink our lives and the way we interact with the world. And it's not just about psychedelics, it's about being open to new ideas and experiences. It's about being willing to question your beliefs and challenge yourself. Because if you're not, you're never going to grow, you're never going to change. And that's what life is all about: growth and change.